shout if I forget to push the button again. I apologize. Okay. Our next question will be directed first to Ted. Ted, describe what processes you use personally to reach consensus among opposing or competing views or among competing interests in a community.
I believe it is the responsibility of those that get elected to this dais to come here every single week and argue to their God-given abilities for what it is they believe, for what it is they advocate for. Now, to do that, we're going to have to be, you have to be knowledgeable, obviously. But more importantly, you have to be willing to come here and argue for what it is you believe. So that's how I would do it in terms of, what was a two-part process? And
well, reaching consensus among opposing or competing views and consensus among competing interests in a community.
Well, the competing interests need to be decided in terms of the common interest. As long as we've got the interests of the people front and center, I think that'll take care of itself. But in terms of how we're going to reach consensus, let me tell you how we're going to reach consensus right now. We get incomplete, cherry-picked financial information all year long. It's evident when it comes to year-end, and it takes 6 months to prepare the CAF, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Now, I'm going to stand right here, and I'm going to say, I've said it from there for years, but I'll say it from this dais here. I'll say, guys, we're getting incomplete, cherry-picked information. Now, how many are in favor of continuing the incomplete, cherry-picked information? Let's put up our hands. And then how many are for reforming our finance department and preparing comprehensive statements here on a monthly basis, and if not monthly, quarterly? We're going to talk a little bit later about the 9% tax increase that's in front of us. But let me tell you, people should have realized that all year long. They sat up here and all year long, we want this, and we want more of that and more of that. Never once getting any cost numbers on anything. And that apparently is hunky-dory with this dais. It will not be with me.
Thank you. Now, Lance, let me repeat the question. What processes do you use to reach consensus among opposing or competing views and among competing interests in a community?
It comes right back down to, again, listening, getting informed. I'm not going to come here and argue, I can assure you of that. I might stand my ground on an issue that I have important to me, but I'm not going to be an arguer. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to progress. I'm here to lead. I'm here to listen to the rest of these council members that the people elect to come up with the best solutions for everybody involved. I'm not going to argue. But again, I'm going to listen and I'm going to be informed, and both sides of the issues, on special interest or the city's interest. I'm going to do what's fair for everyone. I'm going to stand my ground on certain issues that I feel that are important to me, but I'm not here to argue.
Thank you. Don, describe what processes that you use to reach consensus among opposing or competing views or among competing interests in a community.
Well, I think it starts with being a good listener, and I think it also starts with being allowed to change your mind when you know that you have seen new information that allows you to change your mind. I am absolutely not of the belief that you reach consensus by sitting and standing and shouting and screaming and hollering and honestly, I've been on my share of the losing end of some votes, and I've won my share. I've certainly debated and changed other people's minds as well because of my preparation. And that's okay, because when you're sitting there and you're representing the people, it's a job, it's a responsibility that you have to take seriously. You can't take being on the losing end of a vote personally, because there's so many more things. You got 30, 40 things on an agenda, you lose a vote because it didn't quite go your way or quite go the way you thought it would, you got to be able to pivot and go on to the next thing, because once it's done, it's done. You learn from that, you experience that, If at a later date, council decides that maybe that action wasn't the best, then obviously you can pivot, but that's okay. We as a body have to work together. We can have 5 divergent viewpoints, but at the end of the day, we reach a consensus because we're respectful of each other, we listen to each other, sometimes we debate longer than it seems like we should on an issue, but that's because we are respectful of each other's viewpoints. And I think it's important to do that. Listen, learn, understand, and work together. And at the end of the day, leadership has to bring the council together to achieve a consensus so that we can do what's best for the city and its citizens.
Thank you. This next question will be directed first to Lance. Lance, what would you say is your greatest strength and why?
I gotta keep it clean.
Not necessarily. Just keep it honest.
One of my best strengths, again, is my personality. Being a people person. My way of life, and with Susie and I and our kids, are to teach our children to treat people with respect. I treat people with respect until I'm disrespected, and then I cut you off. But my personality and my way of communicating and talking to people, I think, is touching. Just during this campaign, I've been door to door and meeting people and talking to people, and it's been a great experience for me to listen to people and the citizens, and just talking to them about what they care about, what's passionate to them in their city. And I think that my personality and my people skills are one of my best characteristics.
Thank you. That was pretty clean. Don, what would you say is your greatest strength and why?
Without a doubt, I didn't have to think very long and hard about this, because I'm looking down and looking at my family right now. When I grew up, every night we dined together. Me and my sisters, my mom and dad, and we talk about the issues of the day, we talk about family, we talk about what's in the news. And I had a great role model growing up, my father, and he's sitting in front of me. And to this day, he's a great example for me of how to raise a family. Now, I've got 2 boys in high school, and if anybody knows anything about high school students, they are very disagreeable at times, and they are very obstinate at times. And when they want to argue a point, they absolutely can. But I think what they've learned is that how to be respectful at the dinner table and discuss things. And sometimes they hold their ground a little bit too long. But me and my wife managed to reel them in. But without a doubt, everything that I do, I always have them in mind. They're in my heart all the time. If I sound like I'm gushing and gushing, going on about my family a little bit too long, for most people's taste, I'm sorry, but it's real easy for me to do. You guys are the best.
Thank you. Ted, what would you say is your greatest strength and why?
I am a well-read individual in terms of the structure of our government in this country. I am willing, more than willing, to do the one thing that is required of people on this dais. We take one oath and one oath only. It's not to our family and supper time. It's to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and of Florida. And here in Florida, that means conducting government in the open. And I am willing to do that.
Thank you. This one we'll start with Don. Don, what would you say is your greatest weakness and why?
Well, it depends on who's saying it. If it were you, you'd probably say that I talk too much. Sometimes I do get passionate, and I will ramble on about something, and I need to be reminded that there are other viewpoints, and that I need to stop and listen to those. But sometimes you can be overcome by your passion, and you need to govern that as well. But I think I do a pretty good job of keeping it in check most of the time, but occasionally it does run away from me.
Okay, thank you. Ted, what would you say is your greatest weakness and why?
I do not do a good enough job in displaying the empathy that I have for those that are not as well off for me. I come across as too abrasive and too technical. So sadly, I confuse a lot of people initially on that score. However, people that know me for a while, you'll be surprised how many people have come up to me a year later and say, you know, I never understood you to begin with. And I do agree with what it is you're doing and why it is you're doing it. But the weakness part of it is I don't do a good enough job on the initial meeting, the initial perception people have of me in terms of that empathy that I do truly have.
Thank you. Lance, what would you say is your greatest weakness and why?
Probably my biggest weakness is that I have too much passion sometimes. I help people and get involved in things to sometimes my detriment that I take away from my family. I listen to people, and sometimes I might get caught in the stories or the non-truths and things like that. But my biggest weakness is sometimes that I care too much, and unfortunately to my detriment sometimes.
Thank you. I think we've now exhausted pretty much all of the relevant questions about the candidates themselves. I'm going to turn to some other topics, the first one being city priorities. And so with that in mind, let's see who's first now. I think it's you, right, Ted? Two-part question. What do you think are the top 3 priorities to focus on in the next 4 years if you are elected? And what do you think is the city's most pressing issue? And where would you focus more resources if you are elected? So the 3 top priorities and the most pressing issue for the city of Port Orange. Ted.
I have 3 top priorities here in Port Orange. First one undoubtedly is let's open up government. Government has got to be made more transparent in Port Orange. Too many people try and follow the Port Orange story and they get stymied. You can't follow the story. It ends off here at the dais one way, one night, and it picks back up 3 weeks later, and it's a completely different approach. Well, how did we go from here to here? That's the missing ingredient. Another huge priority of mine, and it's timely, it's got to be done immediately, and that's Riverwalk. Riverwalk Park, that is about ready to be sold out. And once it's gone, it'll be gone forever. There's 29 acres down there, and we don't need to be focusing on what someone can do for us before Christmas. We need to be focusing on the population of this town 2 or 3 generations from now. And every inch of that waterfront should be acquired, and it should be preserved as parkland for future generations here in Port Orange. The next priority, I guess I would say, and these are not ranked in terms of strict importance, but we've got to get our finances under control here in Port Orange. These defined benefit pensions will ultimately bankrupt the city. And I will advocate strongly for approaching them in a serious manner. And then what was the last?
Just 3.
But then you said the most pressing something.
The most pressing issue.
I'll say I answered it.
All right. Thank you. Lance, again, to reiterate, the top 3 priorities to focus on in the next 4 years if you're elected, and what do you think is the city's most pressing issue? Where would you focus more resources?
Those are all good questions, Ray. The first thing I'm going to start out with, in my opinion, in my position, one of the most pressing to me is our public safety department and how depleted we are as a public safety department. We do not have the police that it takes to serve our city right now. If we continue to grow, you cannot grow and expect to have the same amount of police officers on the street. It's just not going to happen. Response times are going to go down and service is going to go down. Having a safe community is first and foremost, as far as for me and for my family and for your families, is to make sure that our public safety has what they need to do the job. And what we need right now is to be able to hire and retain officers. Right now we're down probably 10 to 11, maybe even 12 officers. We're continuing to hire guys out of the academy. They may go 1, 2, 3 years, and they're going to go to the next city over for $3 or $4 more an hour. So we need to address our public safety department, and what we pay for a policeman to protect us, and what we pay our public safety to do the job that they do. That's first and foremost, and that's paramount for me, is public safety. The second thing that is addressing to me is the debt. We need to address the debt of the pensions. We're not going to get anywhere with this debt if we continue to just basically stroke the interest. It's like stroking the interest on a credit card. You can stroke the interest, but you got to still pay the note. So at some point in time, we need to get real, and we need to address the debt that the city faces with these pensions. Then the third thing for me is back to affordability. We being in Volusia County are already taxed to second highest tax in the state right now, and the county's looking at another tax increase. So what happens is that makes things harder on Port Orange to say we need this and that in our city, and we want these services in our city, but we can't afford them because we're being taxed out by the county already. So it comes down to affordability.
Did you see the red thing?
I didn't.
Sorry.
I'm talking.
That's one of your greatest strengths. Don.
Can I borrow a couple minutes?
You have a 3-part question and only 2 minutes to answer.
Yeah, that probably wasn't a good idea. I'll break my next 2-part question to 2 questions.
There you go.
But we're gonna do this one the way it was written. What do you think are the top 3 priorities to focus on in the next 4 years? And what do you think is the city's most pressing issue?
Most pressing issue right now is traffic and infrastructure. And I think we've all been frustrated by that. And I can admit that I'm the first guy at a red light when it turns green. When it's time to go, I want to go because I'm going to get somewhere. And then as soon as I get to the next light, it turns red right in front of you. It's a little frustrating. But then there are the other 50 cars in line doing the same thing, and you realize it's not just you. So traffic and infrastructure, it's a quality of life thing. And there are a number of things that we can do. One is, and unfortunately we're going to have to wait until I-95 interchange is complete with the state, because Dunlawton is a state road managed by the county that runs as our one main east-west artery through the city. Great planning? Maybe, maybe not. But at the same time, getting all those people and entities to work together, not the easiest thing in the world to do. But once that interchange is done, we will be able to get a modern communication system that'll help all our lights talk to each other much better. You've got to work on feeder roads, you've got to work on turn lanes, all the things, development away from Dunlawton, so that people don't all go to Dunlawton for everything that they need. So there are things that you can do with traffic and infrastructure. Public safety, it's been mentioned before, very big. We can't do anything. If anybody's familiar with Maslow, you can't self-actualize unless you have safety needs met. And our public safety departments do a terrific job with what they have. Lance mentioned it. We're 10 men down on police, and a lot of it has to do is that we've been doing it on the cheap for so long, we're no longer competitive in pay. So we've got to do something about that. And then, of course, when it comes to maintaining a high quality of life, we take care of those safety and security needs, we take care of those infrastructure needs, and then we move on. The amenities of the city, the appearance of the city, all those things that we want and we're proud of. Of course, we still have to do it by maintaining the balance between our wants and needs and our ability to pay for it. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it the last 6 years. It's still a challenge, but I think that this council is up to that challenge.
Thank you. The next two-part question, I mean, I really am going to break it into two questions. Lance, we start with you. What is your view of the role of local government in the lives of the citizens of a community? Your view of the role of local government in the lives of the citizens of a community?
My view of the role is important, and it comes back down to what I had said previously, is having a vision of what I want my city to be. Having the vision of where our city is going to be 20 years from now. And this, coming in being new, is I'm picking up the pieces of what our previous leaders have done and their vision and where we have come in the last, and I'm going to say 30 years. We had dirt roads in Port Orange 30 years ago, so in the past 30 years, I mean, we've had a vision of our previous leaders of what our city is to be, what it needs to look like, what we're going to provide our residents. So I think that the view is highly important as to where we're going to go for the next 20 years.
Thank you. Don, you're next. Your view of the role of local government in the lives of the citizens in a community.
Well, I know from my experiences on council that this is by far the government that's closest to the people. There have been a number of times people have called me and I answer my cell phone and they say, "You don't have an assistant." I'm like, "No, you've got me right here." And I think that that's a wonderful, wonderful thing because it allows me to be in touch with the wants and the needs and the desires and the issues and the problems and what's right in the community. When you look at the government that we have, you've got to start with this government closest to the people, taking care of the things that nobody should have to think or worry about. Whether it's police protection, whether it's fire protection. Nobody wants to worry about whether their water is going to come or go from their house and that they have clean water when it's needed. Nobody wants to worry about their trash being picked up. Now, you always have issues and problems from time to time, but you want those to be the exception and not the rule. Those four things are the basics that a city can provide. So what we ask beyond that is, what do you want your city to be? What makes Port Orange special? One of those things is quality parks and rec programs. I think that we should have rec programs whether you're 8 or 80. And I think we've seen an explosion in participation in rec programs across all age groups. And it's incredible to see. And when you go out and you see whether it's your own kids or even your own parents participating in the senior games, it really is great to see people enjoying themselves in Port Orange. And then beyond that, whether it be parks that people can enjoy, passive or otherwise, special events, good roads, getting around, good places to go eat, having the environment where people want to come and open a business.